My name is Al Davis. I'm 79 years old and have been active in the power and the energy industry for 55 years. I'm a graduate of the University of California at Berkeley, California, and started my career in the Bay Area and have been working actively in the combustion side of the oil and gas and power industry for my entire career. I've also spent a short period of time working for the government, spent a summer working for NASA in the early stages of the astronaut program.
Ooh.
Did some work on the X-15 rocket ship.
So you're actually a rocket scientist?
Literally, I have done stuff relative to rockets, and I actually have designed a piece of equipment that actually was in the X-15 rocket ship and spent some time in space.
What?
Yes.
That's cool. Okay. So you know a couple things about combustion and fuel and power.
Yes.
Is what you're saying.
Yes.
Then you've been doing this for a little while.
Yep.
So when you say on the combustion side of fossil fuels, what does that mean exactly?
Quite simply, in its simplest explanation, fuel, whether it's the sun, is combusted and converts potential energy that's locked into a chemical compound and releases it in the form of heat. And it's well documented what the process is, that you need oxygen, which is an oxidizer with a fuel that generates the energy.
Yeah.
And depending upon the mixture, you can get relatively modest temperatures, 2,000 or 3,000 or 1,000 or 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, or as much as 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, depending upon the fuel.
What would be an example of 1,000 degrees versus 10,000 degrees?
Carbon monoxide. It's already a partially combusted compound. It's
Okay.
formed by the joining of oxygen with carbon.
Okay.
By comparison, natural gas has a heat content of 1,000 BTUs
Okay.
per cubic foot. Carbon monoxide is around 160
BTUs?
BTUs.
Oh, so it's much lower.
Much lower.
Okay.
So when you add air to it, then obviously it can't generate as much temperature because it doesn't have as much energy.
Okay. And would 10,000 BTUs be something like nuclear power or?
No, it's nuclear power is a totally different physical process. Nuclear power is a result of breaking the chemical bonds between the elements.
Oh.
As opposed to combustion is the joining of chemical compounds.
Oh, okay. So for our purposes of this conversation, we're just going to leave nuclear power out because it's not the same thing. Okay.
Okay.
So what would be an example of something that's 10,000 BTUs?
Hydrazine.
What is that?
It's a chemical compound that has, because of its bonds, when it's added to oxygen, it burns very, very hot. And part of the other thing that controls the temperature is that if you combust something using air, only 20% of it contains oxygen. The other 70 or 80, almost 80% are inert compounds, nitrogen. So you need 5 times as much air to combust something as you do if you're using oxygen, pure oxygen. So, and that translates into the energy that is generated because the nitrogen that's in air is a dilutant effect, and all it does is absorb energy.
Interesting. So, okay, so this is good science information, right? So we're getting an idea of how combustion works and how much heat is created. And so if I burn, let's just let's just start right away with the elephant in the room and the point of this conversation, which is the McNeil power plant in Burlington. So now, currently, the McNeil power plant is burning wood chips to produce power or heat, right? So so basically they're burning wood chips, which creates heat, which in turn creates energy. Okay. And then, so when they're burning wood chips, so this is where I'm trying to tie in that conversation we were just having. So if I take wood chips and I burn them, I'm going to have to add oxygen.
You have to have oxygen to do that.
Okay.
Which comes from air.
It's just the regular air.
Right.
Okay. And then, but how many inert compounds are created from the burning of that?
From the actual burning of the wood chips themselves, relatively few inert. The inert compounds come from the air primarily. So by way of putting it in perspective, wood has a heat content of about 4,000 to 5,000 BTUs per pound.
Okay.
Natural gas, by comparison, has 22,000 BTUs per pound. So you have to burn roughly five times as much wood to generate the same amount of energy. The amount of air is the same.
Oh, okay.
Okay, because from an ideal standpoint, you need so much air for each hydrogen and carbon compound that you're trying to burn. Wood being primarily a hydrocarbon.
Yeah.
It has a mixture of carbon atoms and hydrogen. The main difference is that wood has very close to a 1-to-1 ratio between carbon and hydrogen.
Okay.
As opposed to natural gas, the hydrogen to carbon ratio is 4-to-1. So when you burn wood, you'll get roughly 4 times as much carbon dioxide as if you burn natural gas. Because the 1-to-1 ratio with wood versus the 4-to-1 hydrogen to carbon ratio.
So, okay, so we're going to have to, that's a good one to unpack, right? Because I really want to show people that this wood chip scenario is not better. Like they're trying to build this as a net zero, good for the environment nonsense. So unpack that 1-to-1, the hydrogen element in that conversation.
Okay, so
does that create the carbon dioxide? Like, how does it make more carbon dioxide? Because of hydrogen.
Well,
did I miss that?
Yeah, if you look at the mass percentage that methane has of hydrogen, the molecular weight of hydrogen is 1. So its molecular weight is CH4, which is 12 plus 4, which the molecular weight is 16.
Okay.
Okay. So the carbon in there is like the ratio of 16 to 18 is carbon.
Okay.
Okay. You could do the same thing with wood chips. And just for the simplicity, we'll say that there's 1 carbon for every hydrogen. So that's 12 versus 1. So that means that you have 12, the ratio of 12 to 13 proportion of carbon.
Okay, wait. Okay. So, hold on. Let's back this part up.
All right.
So I might be trying to get into the weeds of the science of it to try to make it make sense. So backing up, so burning wood actually creates more carbon dioxide?
Yes.
Okay, so burning wood creates carbon dioxide. What does burning natural gas create?
Well, both of them create carbon dioxide and water vapor.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
because of the hydrogen. Hydrogen goes to water, carbon goes to carbon dioxide.
Ah, okay.
So-
And both natural gas and wood are carbon-based
Fuels.
fuels.
Right.
Okay. So
So-
but wood has more hydrogen in it.
Right. As a
And
percentage.
as a percentage than natural gas does. So they're both created by the same compounds,
Right.
but one has more hydrogen in it,
Right.
which makes more carbon dioxide when it's burned.
Right. And
Okay.
and then you factor into the fact that to get a given amount of heat, and just for again simplicity, say that you're burning 1 cubic foot of natural gas, you're going to get 1,000 BTUs
Okay.
out of it.
Yep.
Okay. If you burn wood, you've got to burn 5 times that. You've got to burn 5 pounds of wood to get the same amount of energy. So if you take and add to that the fact that the wood has a higher percentage of carbon, you're naturally going, because you're burning more wood to get the same energy, plus you have a higher percentage of carbon in your wood, the net total is you end up with more carbon dioxide going into the air.
Okay. So then how are they justifying the city of Burlington and Burlington Electric? How are they justifying that as net zero carbon, whatever they're just saying?
They
Or that
would-
it's renewable or something?
It's totally based on the concept that it's renewable. You grow trees. So that's the renewable aspect of it, because the perspective is that natural gas there's a fixed amount of natural gas in the earth.
Okay.
So it's a non-renewable source. And eventually we're theoretically going to run out of it. Now, the converse to that is that there are scientists that believe that natural gas is being continuously created in the hot core of the earth. And which is why there are gas fields that were originally developed in the 40s and 50s that are still producing today, even though they were expected to be exhausted within 5 or 10 years.
Really?
Yes.
That's fascinating. Remember back in the 90s, what was it? Peak oil?
Right.
Remember that? Does anybody remember that peak oil conversation that we were going to run out of oil and natural gas?
Right.
I'm
Back-
trying to remember when that
Back
was.
in the
That was
70s.
That was
Under the Carter administration.
okay, and that's why now I'm remembering it, because it was when I was in high school, they were basically saying it was like getting ready to run out or whatever.
right.
And that's when we discovered all these new natural gas
Right.
and oil fields in the United States.
And the truth is the fact that they were only partially right. We were running out of cheap oil and gas because you had to drill deeper and in more remote locations like Alaska and the frozen tundra of Russia to find the resources that were there.
Well, and now there's all these new processes where you can take I'm not going to use the right words, but the not as good oil that you get,
Right.
you can now process it better
Right.
and use and make it usable, because that's what human beings do.
Right.
We innovate, we adapt, and we figure it out.
Right.
So, okay, so we know scientifically that wood chips actually create more carbon dioxide than burning natural gas does.
Right.
We have to use 5 times as much,
Right.
as many wood chips, I don't know what proper English is there,
Pounds.
versus
Yeah.
pounds versus natural gas. So what happens with it must put off extra hydrogen as well, too. Does it put off more water vapor?
Approximately, yeah. There is more water vapor. There's a higher, and if you do the calculations, if you're a calculations nerd, you do the calculations, and if you were to rank natural gas, oil, and wood chips, you would find that carbon dioxide in natural gas combustion is the lowest. Oil is an intermediate because it has a slightly different carbon to hydrogen ratio than wood chips, and wood chips have the largest
Okay.
carbon dioxide.
Where does coal rank in there? Just out of curiosity.
Carbon it's the worst. From a carbon dioxide standpoint, it is the worst because it's pure carbon.
That's pure carbon.
So there is literally very little, there is some small amount of other compounds in coal that will convert to water vapor, but for all practical purposes, it's pure carbon. So you burn a pound of coal, you get pure carbon dioxide. And so it's the worst from a CO2 basis.
Got it. Okay. Okay, so we got wood chips. So is there any negative consequence for the hydrogen that's released?
No.
That just goes, it's
Well,
just water vapor and it just...
It depends from one aspect. This
Yeah.
is a side deal. If you burn hydrogen, say pure hydrogen, in an automobile, which there were people that believe in the hydrogen economy.
I think I've heard of that before.
You probably have heard of it. But one of the things that you have to remember is that if you burned pure hydrogen, it goes to water vapor. So the exhaust that's coming out of your car is water vapor, and if it's emitted into a cold environment, i.e. a Vermont winter, you get ice on your streets. So literally, if you want a hydrogen environment,
so only
and
like
you want
south of the border, basically.
it's a place where you don't run into freezing temperatures for extended periods of time.
It's really funny. Or your car is only good for part of the year. That is... Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so that's a side note. So we don't really have to worry about the hydrogen.
No.
Their excuse for using wood chips is that it's renewable. Have you ever heard them justify the fact that it is actually produces more carbon dioxide and the volume that needs to be trucked up here with the trains and trucks and things like that? Have you ever heard them justify how the fact that it is in fact more polluting is okay because it's renewable? Have you ever heard them talk about that?
I've never heard anybody actually say that.
Yeah.
But that is the, I mean,
I'm
that
curious.
is the primary metric that they use, is the renewable concept, because in most people's mind, when you say renewable, it means that one will never run out of it, which from the wood chip standpoint is relatively true. The other thing that they think is that it's less expensive. Because it's like solar, sunshine. It doesn't cost anything. The sun's free. Trees effectively are free. It doesn't cost anything to grow a tree. So the actual cost of the product is effectively only the harvesting and the transportation cost.
Do they not understand about like land rotation and that
No.
clear cutting?
That's
Clear cutting forests that have animals living in them that they supposedly care about. And
which is why in the western states, that the states, California, Oregon, and Washington, essentially ban the burning of wood chips or forest products in boilers, like the McNeil station.
Really?
Yeah, because the determination by the Sierra Club is that the burning of wood products in a boiler is a egregious pollutant.
I thought we were following California leads and standards and stuff like that.
Not when it comes to burning wood, it doesn't.
That is wild. Okay, so, and this is not me saying that people shouldn't have wood stoves in their house. My sister has a wood stove that she heats her house with in the winter. I know plenty of people who heat their homes with wood. I don't see any problem with that. So this is not meant to be a knock on people who heat their homes with wood, but it does seem really dumb for a city to be using wood to create power.
Right.
It's my understanding is it's also not reliable, that the McNeil power plant
Sure.
actually can't rely on the wood chips.
Right, because particularly like in the wintertime, if you have a massive snowstorm and the highways are unpassable for days and you got a delivery scheduled, you're not going to get it.
What about, do you know this summer, I haven't looked into this yet, when we had record heat and everybody's probably using their air conditioners and things like that, is the McNeil power plant even able to keep up with the power demand? Using wood chips?
Probably not.
Okay.
In all probability. The interesting thing is that the McNeil power plant is permitted, as near as I've been able to determine, can burn a substantial amount of natural gas. But they choose not to for political reasons as opposed to boiler efficiency or clean air reasons. Mm-hmm. The numbers that I remember off the top of my head is that they have the ability to burn at least 90,000 cubic feet an hour of natural gas. But they probably only do that. I don't know if they ever do that, because the amount of wood chips that they're permitted to burn is, I think, something on the order of a quarter of that.
So how do they actually intend, and I've asked city council, and you may not be able to answer this, I've asked them, when, your push to make all landlords convert their properties to electric furnaces, and all homeowners are gonna have to move to electric furnaces, I said, is your intention to burn more wood chips? Because my understanding is the McNeil power plant doesn't have the capacity to actually produce enough power, given the limitation on what they're allowed to burn for power.
Right.
And so I've said, is your intention to burn more wood chips? And they can't answer that question. So do you know, are they, again, you may not be able to answer this, is their intention to expand the power plant to burn more wood chips to create more power? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea what
Yeah.
There's no information that I've seen what the plan for it is. But from a user standpoint, that would be very, very expensive, because the handling of wood chips, you have conveyor belts, you have to have storage, you have to protect it from the winter, because if you let it get wet, then it consumes more energy, because all of the water that is attached to the wood now has to be vaporized. And that's one of the greatest energy losses, is having to vaporize water in the combustion process. It also lowers the temperature of the combustion products, which makes the boilers less efficient. It generates other fugitive emissions that are also not friendly to mankind. And so there's a lot of things that would have to be involved. And one only has to go to an old coal-fired power plant to understand how much real estate is involved in the storage and transport and handling of wood chips.
Yeah.
From the equipment that is used for the burning of wood chips is very expensive to maintain, because depending upon the type of, and this is where I'm not familiar with the actual physical equipment, but equipment like a traveling grate or a stoker type boiler,
Yeah.
there's moving equipment in a high temperature environment that it has to be replaced on a frequent basis, because it's not capable of handling the temperatures for an extended period of time that occur in a combustion furnace.
Wow. So it doesn't sound like there's anything positive or efficient or effective in any kind of a way in burning wood chips as opposed to natural gas.
No, from my perspective and my experience is that the real estate that the McNeil power plant sits on right now, you could replace that facility with a combined cycle power plant that would generate 250 megawatts of power, and it would be half the size. It would be twice as efficient as the McNeil power plant. And so the cost of generating electricity would be correspondingly lower.
So now, okay, so I want to unpack what you just said. So the McNeil power plant, I believe, was originally built to burn coal or oil or something like that.
Right.
Right? And they converted it to natural gas
Right.
back in the 80s?
Yes.
90s? I know I've read this before, so I'm trying to remember. So they converted it to natural gas. And so when you say we could build a new power plant smaller and more efficient, what would be different? Like, what's wrong with the current power plant that makes it inefficient?
Well, the primary things...
Aside from the wood chips.
Right. The primary thing is that the process, the simplest way to describe the process is you burn natural gas or wood chips in the boiler.
Yeah.
And the boiler converts water that's in the boiler tubes from water to steam.
Okay.
The steam is then transported over to a steam turbine, which is akin to, it causes the wheels to spin.
Right.
And it connected to a generator. That process, even with the latest technology, is on the order. Most efficient plants using that technology are about 35% thermal efficiency.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
The alternate technology is to use what is akin to a jet engine, which in the industry is called a combustion turbine.
Okay.
Okay. But so you burn natural gas, and it causes a wheel to spin, and that wheel is then connected to a generator, and you generate electricity. There are turbines on the market today that are 40% plus efficient. So straight off of the what's called a simple cycle combustion turbine, you can get 8%, 7 to 8% higher thermal efficiency, i.e. you use 7 to 8% less energy to generate the same amount of electricity.
Mm. And is that a good savings?
Yeah, at the current price of, and again, if you take the McNeil plant, and if the numbers that I gave, 90,000 cubic feet an hour, 6% is roughly 5,400 cubic feet an hour. Less usage.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Currently, it costs about $6 a 1,000 cubic feet. So if you're burning 5,000, you're spending roughly $30,000 an hour towards 8,000 hours a year. It's roughly $2.4 million higher operating costs.
Okay. And if you take 8% off of that.
No, that is the 8%.
Oh.
That is the 8%.
Oh. So that's saving $2 million.
$2.5 million.
Ish. Okay.
Okay. Now, if you take, now the exhaust off the combustion turbine is roughly 1,000 degrees.
And now this is where your invention, your device comes in.
This is where my equipment does come into.
Okay.
Because the exhaust gas come off at 1,000 degrees.
Okay.
Okay, and depending upon the size of the turbine, you can have anywhere from 200,000 pounds an hour of exhaust gas to as much as 3 or 4 million pounds an hour. But let's just do with the 200,000 pounds an hour. 200,000 pounds an hour with 1,000 degrees will generate roughly 20,000 pounds an hour of steam.
Okay.
Okay. The McNeil plant, if they're burning 90 million BTUs an hour and they're 35% efficient, they can generate roughly 27,000 pounds per hour of steam.
Okay.
They take that 27,000, they run it over to a steam turbine to generate the electricity for the city. So by adding my type of equipment to the exhaust gas, you can elevate the temperature from 1,000 degrees to 1,400 degrees. That will give you an extra 8,000 pounds an hour of steam.
Of electricity.
And take it to the same steam turbine, you generate the same amount of electricity. But you're only burning a half of the amount of natural gas that you would be burning in the McNeil. You'd be burning only 45,000 total cubic feet instead of 90,000.
Because, so this is one of the areas where I listen and I go, okay, I did not follow that. I like almost get there with you. Okay. So basically your device captures the exhaust.
No, it doesn't capture it. It
utilizes it.
it.
So it takes the exhaust that would normally be going out into the atmosphere.
Right.
And so it takes the steam, it's hydrogen or water vapor. Right? So it's taking the steam and it's using it to heat.
No, it's using the equipment that I build is like an afterburner off of the fighter aircraft. They have afterburners to make them go faster. Well, in my case, my afterburner just adds energy to the combustion turbine exhaust. It acts like so instead of only being able to generate 20,000 pounds an hour of steam from the exhaust from the jet engine, you can now generate 28,000 pounds an hour.
So are you actually you're, instead of it just being exhaust into the air, you're actually making more energy with the exhaust.
Right. Greater utilization of the exhaust.
You're making the equipment, the boiler or whatever, you're making it more efficient. Is it making it more efficient or is it?
No. You have to look, it's the overall thermal cycle of all of the equipment that's involved.
Got it.
And like I was saying, is that the conventional McNeil type power plant is 30 to 35% efficient.
Right.
When you take, and it has to do with the amount of energy that you burn or utilize to generate that. And like I was saying, is that with McNeil using 90,000 cubic feet an hour, that's 90 million BTUs an hour to generate 27,000 pounds an hour of steam. If you do the math on that, you divide 27,000 pounds an hour of steam is effectively 27 million BTUs an hour of usable energy.
Okay.
If you burn 90,000 cubic feet of natural gas to get that, you're roughly 30% efficient.
Got it.
Okay. If with the combustion turbine and what is called a duct burner, you can generate that 28,000 pounds an hour of steam, and you only would have to use about 40,000 cubic feet of natural gas. The thermal efficiency is roughly 60%. So you're getting the same usable energy from the consumer standpoint, but your natural gas usage is roughly half.
That is crazy.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's when you look at thermal efficiency, 30% versus 60, that's the straight number that you get.
So are you having when you shop this device around to different power plants other than Vermont,
Right.
are you Are you well received? Are people
Oh.
happy about it?
They're, okay, to give you an idea of exactly, for example, the Phoenix metropolitan area,
Yeah.
okay, they have somewhere in excess of 30 combined cycle power plants within a 60-mile radius of the city of Phoenix.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know the exact population of the city of Phoenix,
A
but
lot.
it's
It's
several million.
Yes.
Okay.
Big city.
City of Vermont or Burlington is what, 30, 40,000?
50,000.
Right.
With the college students here and everything.
Right. Okay. So all of those power plants, Arizona Public Service and all this sort of thing, are for a reason.
Yeah.
One is that they don't have a lot of wood chips in the area because there's not a lot of
Because
forest.
there's no trees.
Right. Northern Arizona,
yeah,
Arizona,
yeah.
they are, but they're also part of the deal that the harvesting of forest for energy is not considered desirable.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of natural gas available from Texas, Mexico, and other places, and it's more cost effective to generate electricity that way.
Yeah.
And so that's why they do it.
Yeah.
So they sell, a lot of the power plants sell electricity to California.
Because they can't make enough of their
Well, they
own.
don't, no, they can, they just don't, they choose
don't
not
want
to.
to.
Right. And the state of Nevada is a benefactor of the obsession that California has for electricity, but they don't generate it in state because fossil fuels are evil. So they import power from Nevada
That makes sense.
because Nevada is a more practical state and they allow the building of power plants, but they also allow solar power plants to be built because it's a desert. Nobody really cares if
Yeah.
you cover up a lot of the desert land with solar panels. Which is one of the reasons why that Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world, owns Nevada Power, because he can generate renewable energy and sell it to California at a premium. And by way of comparison, there's a power plant, there's a solar plant right next to a combined cycle power plant. Combined cycle power plant generates 530,000 megawatts, or 530 megawatts of power. The solar plant generates 5. the
And think
combined
about
cycle.
all of the toxic waste that is. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
finish.
we won't go into the manufacturing of solar power.
Yeah.
That's a different discussion.
Yeah.
But real estate wise, the combined cycle plant sits on 10 acres. The solar plant sits on 100.
I bet.
So you get 100 times as much power on 1/10 the size of land. So if you look at the amount of gigawatts that our combined cycle plants generate, if you replace them with solar panels, you literally would cover up the entire Northeast. There would be no land for residents because it'd be all of the solar power plant.
But that's the solution somehow.
That is the solution. Yeah.
And clear cutting forests with animal habitats and all that
Right.
other stuff, which we supposedly care about too, that's also acceptable.
Right. And the reason you get away with it in Vermont is because the wood sources, and I'm not 100% sure of this, but I do believe that the major source of the wood chips is not Vermont.
Oh, it's not.
It's New York.
Interesting. I wonder if we can figure out how many acres of trees have to be cut down in order to power Vermont or power McNeil for a day or a week or whatever. I'm really curious.
It all depends upon the size of the trees.
Yeah. Okay. Note to self: look up how many trees have to be
lot.
burned by acreage. I want to get.
Oh, it's a fairly simple calculation. You take the diameter of the tree, the height of the tree,
Yeah.
and you can calculate the pounds that a single tree calculates or represents.
Yeah.
And then look at 4,000 pounds an hour toward into 90 million BTUs an hour, and you can see how much
Wait, okay, so if I figure out how many pounds a tree
you need
makes.
and how much an average tree weighs, you can calculate the amount of trees it would take.
Because they 4,000 pounds, is that what you said?
It's 4,000 BTUs per pound.
4,000 BTUs per
So
pound
if
at
you-
90,000 BTUs.
So so
Okay.
if you divide 90,000 by 4, it tells you the number of pounds per hour of trees that has to be consumed.
Okay.
And then, like I said, calculate the
Yeah.
size of a tree and its weight, and you can come up with it.
Oh my God.
It's a lot.
It's so stupid. Okay. I'm trying to figure out how much more I should ask you.
Okay. Well, we haven't gotten into some of the other emissions associated with wood.
Okay. Okay. So what are some other Okay, wait. Share some other environmental problems with burning wood, other than killing forest habitats for animals and and the weight and cost of shipping it here.
Okay. The normal products of combustion for wood burning, and doesn't matter whether it's wood burning stove or McNeil, creosote,
Okay.
which is a tar-like substance.
Oh yeah, we've dealt with that in our chimney.
Chimneys.
Okay.
Right? That's why you have chimney sweeps.
Yeah.
Because if you don't remove it, it can actually ignite and it'll burn.
Okay.
Because creosote is a form of oil.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, railroad ties,
Yep.
they're coated with creosote
On purpose?
on purpose. Because the wood that they coat doesn't degenerate over time like natural wood does.
Okay.
It doesn't turn into sawdust.
All right.
And plus other animals like termites don't like it.
Don't want to eat it.
They
Yeah.
don't eat it.
Okay. So that's a
So
byproduct.
That's a byproduct.
And is it like carbon?
Yeah, it's a carbon.
Some
it's
kind of
basic-
carbon something?
Yeah.
So if it ignites and it's
kind of
oil.
like oil.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Got it.
So the other thing is that you can get, and again, it depends upon how clean the wood chips are. Because if it's pure wood chips to where they've removed the bark and there are no leaves, then it's primarily a carbon hydrogen component.
Okay.
But McNeil also burns a lot of
Yard waste.
yard waste,
Yeah.
leaves.
Yeah.
And leaves are green because of chlorophyll.
Okay.
Chlorophyll is a chlorinated hydrocarbon.
Okay.
So when you burn it, you get hydrochloric acid.
You're joking.
No, I'm not.
You're not serious.
I'm absolutely
So we're
serious.
putting
Hydrochloric acid into the atmosphere unless they scrub it. And if they scrub it, then they have a caustic scrub, and you end up with salt. Because
You end
salt
up-
is sodium chloride.
so okay, so on both of those things, okay. Now this is so dumb sometimes that I just can't get over how dumb it is. So if they have creosote that would collect in the boilers, I'm guessing, or the exhaust or whatever.
Very little creosote will come out of the boiler because of the temperatures they burn.
Okay.
The creosote requires a surface to condense on.
Okay.
So the creosote in wood burning stoves, fireplaces, is because the air that is used is very high. So the actual temperature that goes into the flue is relatively low.
Yeah.
And that's where it condenses and deposits on yours.
So do they create a hazardous waste that they then have to dispose of?
From the creosote?
Yeah.
Probably not at McNeil, but the chimney sweeps do.
Yeah.
So because basically you have creosote, which is a tar,
Yeah.
and it either has to be burned or it has to be disposed of.
Right.
It's kind of like getting rid of your engine oil.
Right. So that's what I'm wondering. If it's burning in McNeil, where does it go once it's created?
Well, most of it does go to carbon dioxide.
Oh, so it just goes out. That also just ends up in the air.
Right, yeah, that's part of the combustion process. So, yeah, and but the hydrochloric acid is one of the things that does come out. The other thing is arsenic. It's one of the byproducts of combustion of wood. There's a number of...
What is arsenic? I guess I don't know what arsenic is.
It's a poison.
Well, that's what I mean. I thought it was like some other chemical compound or something.
It is. In the combustion process, the ideal thing is if you've got pure hydrogen and carbon components coming in,
Yep.
you'll get nothing but water vapor and
Carbon dioxide.
smoke. Carbon dioxide and water vapor coming out the stack.
Right.
But like so many things, the process is not perfect.
And there's
So there
especially if you're using
are what we would call fugitive compounds that are formed in the process because the thermodynamics present the conditions under which they will be formed.
And if you're using random crap like
Yeah.
leaves and stuff that has all these other chemical compounds in it.
Right.
So does the arsenic end up in the air as well?
As far as I know. I mean, you'd have to look at what kind of cleanup that they have. The normal thing is that they have particulate removal because you end up with wood. Inevitably, you get sand and dirt as part of the stuff that comes along.
Right, ash, something.
And and other inert compounds that have to be removed. Other than that, it's a matter of where the regulatory bodies have determined that there are these fugitive compounds that come along with it and whether or not they risk a health hazard to the public. And California determined that because they didn't like the harvesting of the forest, the Sierras, and that sort of thing, they elected to say that these compounds are health hazards and people, if you put it into the atmosphere, people will die, and so they banned it.
I think it's so fascinating that the whole focus for Burlington seems to be that it's renewable and they don't care that it actually is creating more carbon dioxide poisoning. It's creating...
Carbon dioxide is not a poison.
Sorry, carbon dioxide...
Emissions.
Wait, what do you mean carbon dioxide isn't a poison?
Well, because it occurs naturally in the environment, and it doesn't poison you. The only reason that you would be subject to any health hazards due to carbon dioxide is if you replaced the oxygen in the air that you need to breathe with carbon dioxide. But that's true of anything. If you breathe nothing but pure nitrogen, you're going to die.
Well, right, but there is nitrogen in the air.
Right, and there's small amounts of carbon dioxide in the air, and there have been for millions of years.
We're breathing it out. So it's carbon monoxide.
No, it's carbon dioxide, any inert gas. Carbon monoxide interacts with the human breathing process differently than carbon dioxide does.
Okay, because see, that's what when I thought of that, I'm thinking about people, who get in their cars in the garage and they end up passing away from poisoning.
It's the carbon monoxide.
Okay.
Right.
So.
But ultimately, to address your point on the suicides, it's the elimination of oxygen in the air that kills them.
It's not the compound itself.
No, because you need oxygen to live. And it doesn't matter whether you replace that oxygen with nitrogen, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, ammonia,
whatever,
helium. If you breathe 100%,
throw some bleach
you breathe 100%
Windex
helium
together.
long enough, you will die.
Okay, so now if I remember correctly, carbon dioxide was demonized, because of course there was a hole in the ozone layer and all of this stuff.
Not that the ozone is not affected by carbon dioxide. It was It was chlorinated hydrocarbons from refrigeration. That's why they went from the type of refrigeration gas that was used in the 50s and 60s, which was Freon,
Yeah.
to a different one.
Okay.
So,
Well, and that hole in the ozone layer is closed, by the way, also.
Right.
That, so everybody knows. The hole in the ozone layer is closed now. So, and I'm not in your way, right? Okay.
no.
So, okay, so carbon dioxide is not the bad guy that they try to make us think that it is.
Well, theoretically, it's bad from a different perspective.
Okay.
The so-called global warming, greenhouse gas.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
All gases have absorption and emissivity characteristics, which means that on the absorption side, it absorbs heat from the sun, and from an emissivity standpoint, it re-radiates heat.
Okay.
Okay. The frequencies at which it absorbs is different than the frequency with which it emits.
Okay.
Which is why whenever you have a glass window, sun comes in, it heats your furniture, and the furniture tries to re-emit the heat back out the window. But because the window doesn't pass the frequency, the emission, the frequency of the light from the furniture, as well as it lets it through from the sun, that difference is retained inside the house, which is why your house gets hot in the summertime.
Okay.
So all gases have absorption and emissivity characteristics. Carbon dioxide is one that has a relatively high absorption. Right? Natural gas also has a higher differential, and the key is the differential between the two.
Okay.
So if you have two gases at the same temperature, they will absorb and emit heat at different rates.
Okay.
And then surfaces also have different solids
Okay.
do.
Yeah.
Like, for example, asphalt
Stays hot.
stays hot more so than concrete.
Yep.
Okay, but we cover all our roads mostly with asphalt, which from a global warming standpoint is the exact opposite of what you want to do. You want all your roads to be white because white is more reflective.
So instead of radiating, absorbing, and then
Right, right. White reflects heat more readily than black does. Which is why, if you actually dig into the science of temperature measurements,
Yeah.
you find that most of the global warming that's occurred has occurred in the metropolitan areas because we're covering more and more of the land with asphalt and buildings, dark colors, that absorb heat and retain it. And those temperature measurements around the metropolitan areas historically are going up dramatically. But when you take and you add those to the temperature readings that are taken in the rural areas, which have not significant changed at all, the overall temperature rise is higher.
So is that
That's-
why it's all of our elite who think that the world is going to end in 10 years because they're living in cities where they're actually feeling some effects of this stuff rather than the rest of us?
No, I think the reason that they are feeling this is because they need an issue to exert control over industries that historically they've had no control over. The oil and gas industry, which is concentrated primarily in parts of the country and world that are more independent thinking.
Well, and it's so funny to me, Al, because when you go back and look, we've been warned of a climate crisis at least since the 60s and 70s. I've gone back and looked at the literature. You know, back then it was we were having a global cooling and there was
Right.
going to be another ice age.
right.
And then, you know, the peak oil that we talked about a little bit earlier, and now it's global warming, but now, well, it's not really warming, and oh, those ice caps have refrozen. The polar ice caps are now like refrozen again, and now it's climate change, and we're blaming hurricanes, and it's like,
It's all a matter of, from the perspective you're talking about, the goal is to create a mindset of fear in the general public,
yeah,
so that there is a crisis that needs to be controlled or solved. And who is going to do that? The government.
of course.
So they will control things, control what you drive, what you use to heat your home. But it's all about determining, and for example, one of the reasons why I believe that the focus is on converting the world to electricity is that it again gives them more control. There have been recent examples where people's air conditioning settings, air conditioners in general, have been turned off by their own, the thermostat that you have in your home. So literally the government or the electrical utility has control of how you use energy in your house.
That is happening here?
It's existing
In the United
today.
States?
Yes. So if you translate that or extend it to your automobile, the average automobile has maybe 240, 300 mile radius on the single battery charge.
Yep.
And so what happens if you shut down all the battery charging stations?
Then nobody can go anywhere.
You can't go anywhere, exactly. Whereas gasoline can be stored. So if you, for example, live in a remote site, you can store 200, 300, 400 gallons of gasoline that can get you through the winter, but you can't store enough energy on a reasonably sized piece of property to get you through the winter from a battery storage capability.
And this is one of the things that is so that I cannot figure out, particularly again with the McNeil plant, is you guys don't have the capacity to do what you're saying that you want to do. You don't have the infrastructure for it. You gave us a 7.5% rate increase this year. Now you're asking for a $20 million bond to start transitioning to everyone being on electric. You are making electricity and power cost so much, and I wonder if this is the point, is to make it so costly that people just won't use it. Like, is it like because you want people to use less? Like, because you can't actually think.
I have little information about what their thinking is.
Yeah.
But from the practical aspect of it, like for example, in this house, we have a power outage. We don't have any lights, can't use computers, and all that sort of thing. But I can use my stove to burn natural gas to provide heat for my house.
And cook food.
Cook food and heat water and all kinds of things that can continue to occur. When you burn natural gas on my stove, all of the heat either goes into what I'm cooking or it goes into the air here in my room.
Yep.
So it's not wasted.
Yeah.
And again, it's more efficient than burning natural gas even in a power plant, because I've got to burn 3 times as much natural gas to get the same energy usage on my stove.
Because of the efficiency issues of
Right.
the
Direct
situation.
usage, right.
That's so fascinating.
And again, if you want to control people, you control their ability to live, whether it's their health care or their energy usage on a personal basis, whether it's their car or heating their houses. If you can threaten in the dead of winter to turn off electricity to, and now they'll say, oh no, we would never do that. Well, I think history will prove that people that are after power will do what suits their purposes from what they're trying to accomplish.
Because it literally doesn't make sense. You can't, on one hand, all of our city councilors and Mayor Weinberger, they say, oh, we care about affordability and we care about people, and yet they keep making decisions that are make it more expensive.
If they truly cared about making energy more affordable, they would be shutting down the power plant, McNeil power plant, and they would be putting a combined cycle power plant in there, because the cost of generating electricity would be a third of what they currently are charging people. So who are going to benefit from that? The low-income people, which they currently have to take care of by having programs to have people of better, higher means to subsidize the people that can't afford it. Why not just make it affordable so that you don't have to have that? Because then you don't have to have the bureaucracy that disperses and monitors all of that, which is a separate argument.
That's exactly.
Which, and again, going to further into those kinds of weeds, which is why India and China are building power plants to the tune of 1 to 3 a day. Yeah, China's commissioning over 300 coal-fired power plants in the coming year.
Coal-fired?
Yeah, coal-fired, because it's the cheapest fuel.
Okay.
So their energy costs are going to be lower than ours.
Wow.
So that they can continue to expand their industrial base. Same thing is true in India. They're building coal-fired power plants because, for a couple of reasons. One, both countries have indigenous sources of coal.
Coal.
Right. India has very little natural gas. Most of it's offshore. China has very little. If you go back historically, if you go back to the Vietnam War, one of the things that was revealed in the Pentagon Papers is that it was the protection of the gas reserves that were in the South China Sea was part of the motivation why we got involved in protecting Vietnam. Because if you look at Vietnam, it borders the South China Sea.
So you mentioned the best thing we could do is build a something cycle power plant instead of McNeil. What did you call that?
Combined cycle.
Combined cycle. What does that mean?
Well, in the energy world, there are lots of thermodynamic cycles. In the case of the combined cycle, there are 2 thermodynamic processes that are being used.
Okay.
The combustion turbine is one. It generates electricity. Okay.
Yep.
The steam turbine is a different thermodynamic cycle. So that's where the term combine says that you combine 2 thermodynamic cycles to generate the same output, which is electricity.
Got it.
So that's the definition of a combined cycle.
Okay. How much does it cost to build something like that?
A small one will be, I'm going to say a small one can be done for a couple of $1 million. A large one will probably run, $400 or $500 million.
Okay, Al. Okay, I'm just going to be late for my next meeting. Okay, so are you trying to tell me that we could build a combined cycle power plant for a couple $1 million? Say $10 million.
Well, to replace McNeil would probably be a few tens of millions, like maybe 40 million, something like that.
40 million.
Right.
So, so to replace McNeil with a combined cycle power plant would be maybe 40 million.
Right.
So basically what they're asking for this bond to just start to be able to use the McNeil power plant to make more electricity using wood chips.
Right. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. I mean, I have just been at 2 universities this last week.
Yeah.
Okay. Both of them have their own combined cycle plants on the university grant,
Yeah.
and they generate more electricity than would be required to generate electricity for the entire city of Burlington. And the university paid for it. I mean, I could actually find out the exact dollars for what they spent, but I don't know what's the You may have to edit this out.
Yeah, that last part.
But yeah.
So
But the numbers are fairly available from a standpoint. And there are investors, like for example, that would be more than happy to build a combined cycle power plant in the city of Burlington and sell electricity to the city at the rates that they're currently paying for.
okay, some of this stuff is so infuriating. It's hard to even collect myself to have a reasonable conversation.
Well,
it's so stupid.
It's because the reasons are being made for reasons other than economics. They're based on agendas that really have little or nothing to do with what's a benefit to the general public. And
it really is.
First and foremost, energy is the engine that runs the world. So if you want to create an environment that is affordable, you start with your energy cost.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether you're a retired person living on a fixed income, your electrical cost or your natural gas cost, you want those to be as low as possible.
Yeah.
Okay? If you're a business, your energy cost is one of your biggest expenses, depending upon the type of process that you have.
Yeah.
So, I mean, people like Intel,
Yeah.
they have their own
Oh my
combined.
God, with their own all
they
those
have their-
servers and everything.
Oh, if you want to go see a industrial combined cycle plant, go to any server farm. Apple built its own power plant to power their servers in Nevada.
That's wild.
Amazon does the same thing.
That doesn't surprise me,
Yeah.
especially if you
Because-
have to have reliable power that's outside of these municipalities doing nonsense.
You don't have to worry about a storm coming along. If you have your own power, you don't have to worry about a storm coming along, knocking out the power lines.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about a drunk driver in the middle of the night knocking down a power pole. You don't have to worry about a
Any
wood
of
chip truck taking out a substation because they go off the road.
Please tell me that didn't happen. Please tell me you just
It has
made
not
that up.
happened, but okay. We'll go into one of the other areas that risk assessment is on the emission side. There's an obsession in a lot of parts of the world of reducing the nitric oxide emissions that are a natural result of combustion process.
Okay.
Nitrogen actually joins with oxygen and forms NO2. It can go into the atmosphere, join with water vapor, and you get nitrous acid, which, because it's a condensable gas,
Yeah.
can go into rivers and waterways.
Acid rain.
Right, acid rain. California, as a leader of environmental movements, years ago, a person from the South Coast Air Quality District heard about or read an article about an SCR process by a Japanese company, which primary business was selling catalyst. But so he went to Japan, observed the experiments, which they were nothing more than experiments. Had never been done on an industrial size. Came back and convinced the city of Los Angeles that SCR was the best available control technology for the reduction of nitric oxides emissions from combustion process. It had never been done before. But that became the law of the land. At the original levels, they were reducing NOx to, in the 30 to 40 part per million range. But today, the numbers are down in single digits. In many places, it's around 2 parts per million. Well, one of the reasons that the SCR process works is that you inject ammonia in some form into the product's combustion. You run it across a catalyst, and it converts the nitric oxide back to water vapor and nitrogen, which is good.
Okay.
Except, as all things, it's not perfect.
Yeah.
There's what's known as an ammonia slipstream. So some of the ammonia goes through the process and is unaffected by the catalyst, or it bypasses the catalyst and goes out into the atmosphere. Ammonia, by its nature, actually joins more readily to water vapor than
The nitric oxide.
Nitric oxide. So you still get acid rain. But in the finest tradition of people who follow the science, they allow 5 to 6 parts per million of ammonia slipstream, but they only allow 2 to 3 parts per million nitric oxide. But that's not the most dangerous part of it. One of the ways they deliver the ammonia is called anhydrous ammonia. Okay, and it's a gas or a liquid under high pressure. It's put in storage tanks and stored on sites, and it's used. But what happens if you get an ammonia leak?
You kill people.
You get an ammonia cloud.
Yeah.
You live about 3 seconds if you inhale ammonia. So there are plants, power plants, that have anhydrous ammonia storage facilities on their facilities close by residential areas, near schools.
And so
There are only one and in some cases, the only way you can get the anhydrous ammonia on the property is to truck it. So have you ever heard of a truck having an accident on a freeway? And if it happens in a major metropolitan area, fortunately it's never happened.
do those SCR, what kind of power plant does that get put on?
It can be as small combined heat and power plant, like at a university, or it can be a large central power station.
So what is the point of doing that?
Just reduces the nitric oxide emitted into the.
So instead we just emit ammonia.
Exactly. And like, for example, one of the universities I was at, which is like in a major metropolitan area, campus, and their nitric oxide emissions are like 10 to 12 parts per million. If the state that the university is located in were California, they'd have to reduce that from 10 to 2 or 3, with no health benefits of making that reduction. But they'd be exposing the student body and the general public to a very hazardous chemical. Does that make sense? No, but that's because the whole SCR mania was created by politics.
Ah, okay. So so the science. The science.
The science.
Okay, so what is there anything else that we haven't talked about specifically, especially Burlington Power, McNeil, or anything like that, the dumbness of it all, that we should make sure that we cover or talk about or highlight?
No, I think we pretty much covered the essential elements, and it really depends. The decisions are based on what is the motivation, whether it is creating a affordable energy source to be used by the general public, or to create a mechanisms by which a government can exert greater control over what goes on in the lives of its citizenry.
Yeah.
And the economics speaks for itself.
It really is shameful, in my opinion, the way that they try to manipulate people. Oh, it's for the greater good, and it's for the the less fortunate, and we're trying to take care of people. And it's like, but you're not, though, and you're making other people's lives worse, and they're less able to take care of their families.
Right.
So it's not even. I don't know. How do they ever prove?
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Barney, shh. I'm here.
Oh, does he think he's alone or
Yeah,
something?
right, yeah.
You're good, my man.
He doesn't know, he doesn't have any idea where he is. Shh.
Is he blind?
He's blind and he's hard of hearing. And see, he walks on things very gingerly because he doesn't know where he's stepping. He stepped on the hardwood floors and
that makes him nervous.
he's
Poor
nervous.
thing.
Yeah.
It's the fact that they're never made to prove or be responsible for the decisions that they make is what's shocking to me. It's so provably wrong.
Right. And there's another example of what you're saying being true, because in virtually none of the literature that I have seen about progressive things that they're doing do they ever actually tell you what the cost is going to be. A good example of that is Vermont gas, which is also part of, if you want to call it, a cabal, are making big deals about the use of renewable natural gas from dairy farms.
Oh, right. Like the methane.
The
whatever.
methane, right, because cow poop converts to methane, et cetera. But they don't tell you what the cost of the natural gas that they're paying these farmers for their changes that they're made to be able to generate this gas. They're not telling you what they're paying them, as opposed to what they pay the gas company that supplies us with natural gas and the normal mechanisms.
Yeah.
So, in my view, anytime that you don't know what the cost is, you're not being allowed to make an informed decision. And that ends up being one of the things is that in terms of ballot thing, some states provide a lot of information about a ballot issue. Opinions from those that are in favor of it, those that are opposed to it, are allowed to, with your ballot, you get information about what the impact is going to be. Is it going to raise your utility rate? Is it going to reduce your utility rate? And so those are things that are missing in terms of the political world here. And like I said, there's two decision processes. One is, in our time, the economic, whether it's beneficial economically or whether or not it's beneficial to the politics of the people that are pushing a particular agenda. The old adage, if you want to find out why they're doing it, follow the money.
Follow the money.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And in this case, they want to take the money from you and I, and they want to move it someplace, and we don't know where it's going. But
That's right.
We know it's not going to be beneficial to us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Al,
My
for
pleasure.
taking the time to explain this stuff to me today.
Yeah,
I
be
really
more than
appreciate
happy
it.
to talk about any time you want.
Yeah. All right.
All right, thank you.